The ship was dying. Ambassador knew this as she pressed her forearms against the cold metal wall. The lights flickered above her. Red warning signs flashed everywhere. The air smelled wrong, filled with smoke and fear. The research vessel Harmony's Grace had been a beautiful ship once. Its crystal hull had shined like a jewel among the stars. Now that hull was broken. Air escaped through the cracks into the empty void of space. 47 beings from 12 different species huddled in the emergency compartments, waiting for death. And moved through the dark corridor. Her blue skin was pale with terror. Her large black eyes scanned the damage around her. She had served the Galactic Concordance for 60 years. She had seen wars. She had seen plagues. She had negotiated peace between species that wanted to destroy each other. But she had never seen anything like the Eth swarm. They had come without warning. One moment the Harmony's Grace was traveling peacefully through the nebula. The next moment, thousands of black shapes appeared on the sensors. The swarm moved like a cloud of death. Each creature was the size of a small shuttle. They had no eyes, no faces, just mouths filled with teeth that could tear through metal like paper. The first wave had hit the ship before anyone could react. They chewed through the outer hull in seconds. They killed the engine crew before they could send a single message. By the time it reached the bridge, half the ship was already gone. Captain, a tall insect-like, had given his life to seal the emergency doors, and still heard his screams in her mind. She would hear them forever. Now she stood before the emergency beacon. It was an old device, designed for moments exactly like this one. When activated, it would send a signal across the entire galaxy. Every species in the Concordance would hear it. Every ship within range would know that the Harmony's Grace needed help. But it knew the truth. Help would not come in time. She had checked the calculations herself. The nearest Concordance military vessel was 18 cycles away. The swarm would finish feeding in 6. There was no hope. There was no rescue. There was only the beacon and the small comfort that someone would know how they died. Her trembling hand pressed the activation button. The beacon hummed to life. A pulse of energy shot outward, traveling faster than light itself. It carried a simple message, coordinates, ship identification, and one word repeated over and over: help, help, help. And slumped against the wall. Around her she could hear the swarm moving outside the hull. They were patient hunters. They knew their prey was trapped. They would wait until the air ran out or until they found a way through the sealed doors. Either way, the ending would be the same. She thought about her home world, the purple forests the singing rivers that glowed at night. She would never see them again. She thought about her children, grown now, living their own lives among the stars. They would mourn her. They would remember her. And then, like all things, they would move on. The communication panel crackled. And looked up. That was impossible. The main systems were destroyed. Communications should have been dead. But the panel crackled again, and a voice emerged from the static. It was not a voice she recognized. It was not speaking any language in the Concordance database. The translator struggled for a moment, then finally produced words that made her blood run cold. Distress signal received. Hold position, we are coming. The message was short, direct. There was no identification, no species marker, no ship registry, just those 8 words spoken in a tone that carried no fear, no doubt, no hesitation. Anne's fingers flew across the damaged console. She needed to know who had answered. She needed to know where the message came from. The computer worked slowly, damaged systems struggling to process her request. Finally, an answer appeared on the screen. Signal origin, Sector 7 Gamma, the quarantine zone. And stopped breathing. Every child in the Concordance knew about the quarantine zone. It was a region of space that had been sealed off 300 years ago. No ships were allowed to enter. No signals were allowed to leave. The Concordance had built a wall of warning beacons around it, each one broadcasting the same message in 1,000 languages: do not approach. Do not communicate. Do not engage. The official record said the quarantine was for protection. A dangerous species lived there, the record said. A species that had failed the Concordance's tests for peaceful integration. A species that was too violent, too unpredictable, too strange to be allowed among civilized beings. But Anne had heard the unofficial stories. She had heard the whispers that passed between diplomats in dark corners. She had heard about a species born on a world so hostile that it should have killed them. A world with a poison atmosphere, crushing gravity, and predators around every corner. A world the Concordance scientists had classified as a Category 12 death world. Nothing should have evolved intelligence on such a world. Nothing should have survived long enough to reach the stars, but something had, something that called itself human. And had read the first contact reports. They were classified at the highest level, but she had the clearance. She remembered the descriptions that made no sense. Beings that could survive injuries that would kill any other species. Beings that formed emotional bonds with anything, even creatures that could harm them. Beings that did not know how to give up, did not know how to surrender, did not understand the concept of acceptable losses. The Concordance had taken one look at humanity and decided the galaxy was not ready for them. Perhaps the galaxy would never be ready. So they had built the quarantine, and they had hoped that the humans would simply stay there, contained, forgotten. Now the humans were coming, and did not know whether to feel hope or terror. She looked at the communication panel, half expecting another message. But there was only silence. The humans had said they were coming, and apparently that was all they needed to say. She walked back to the emergency compartment where the other survivors waited. They looked at her with desperate eyes. And 9 other species, all of them afraid, all of them waiting for news. Someone answered and said, her voice was steady though her hearts were racing, "Someone is coming." "The fleet?" asked a young hope bright in his eyes. And hesitated. She could lie. She could give them false comfort in their final hours, but she had never been good at lying. "Not the fleet," she said. "Something from the quarantine zone, the humans." The reaction was immediate. Some of the survivors drew back in fear. Others made religious gestures, warding off evil. The young went pale, his scales losing all color. "The death," someone whispered, "the monsters. They said they are coming to help," and said. "Help?" An old laughed bitterly. "Humans do not help, humans hunt, humans destroy. We have all heard the stories." And had heard the stories too, but she had also read the first contact reports carefully, and she remembered one detail that everyone else seemed to forget. When the Concordance scouts had first met humanity, the humans had not attacked. They had not threatened. They had offered their hand in greeting, and they had said a single word. "Friend." The Concordance had responded with fear and quarantine. Now, 300 years later, the humans were still answering distress calls. They were still coming to help. Outside the hull, the swarm continued to circle. Inside the dying ship, 47 beings waited, and somewhere in the darkness of space, something was moving toward them, something fast, something old, something human. And closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt since the attack began. Hope. High Admiral stood in the command center of the Concordance defense grid. The room was massive, filled with screens and holographic displays that showed every corner of the civilized galaxy. Thousands of officers worked at their stations, monitoring ship movements, tracking threats, keeping the peace. Had served in this room for 30 years. He had seen pirates and wars and natural disasters. He had commanded fleets and saved billions of lives. He was a hero to his people, and a respected leader throughout the Concordance. But right now, his hands were shaking. The message had arrived 10 minutes ago, a distress signal from the Harmony's Grace. That alone was terrible news. The ship carried diplomats from 12 species, including several high-ranking officials. The Eth swarm was attacking them. The fleet could not arrive in time. But that was not why I was afraid. Sir, his tactical officer, a young female named, spoke with a trembling voice. We have detected movement from Sector 7 Gamma. Sector 7 Gamma, the quarantine zone, the place where nightmares lived. Show me, commanded. The main screen changed. It showed a region of space marked in red. Warning symbols surrounded it on all sides. And there, moving through the darkness, were three small shapes. Three ships, traveling at incredible speed, heading directly toward the nebula. 3 vessels have crossed the quarantine line, reported. Her voice cracked on the last word. They are heading toward the distress signal. Identification, asked, though he already knew the answer. Human vessels, sir. Terran Response Fleet. Ship names. Paused, reading her screen. Defiance, Relentless, and Fury. The names seemed to echo through the command center. Officers stopped working. Conversations died. Everyone turned to look at the screen, at those 3 small shapes moving through space. Remembered his grandfather. The old man had been a young officer during first contact. He had been there when the Concordant scouts first encountered humanity. He had seen the humans with his own eyes, spoken to them, watched them. And he had spent the rest of his life having nightmares. They evolved on a death world, his grandfather had told him years ago. His voice had been quiet, his eyes haunted. Category 12, the worst kind. Their sun bombards them with radiation. Their atmosphere is filled with a corrosive gas they call oxygen. The gravity would crush most species. Young had listened with wide eyes. How did they survive? They did not just survive, his grandfather had said. They thrived. They became the dominant species on their planet. They killed everything that threatened them. They tamed their world through violence and determination. His grandfather had paused then, taking a deep breath before continuing. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is how they hunt. Most predators use speed or strength or venom. Humans have none of these things. They are slow compared to their prey. They are weak compared to many creatures. They have no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. Then how do they hunt? Had asked. His grandfather's eyes had grown distant. They follow. They walk after their prey hour after hour, day after day. They do not stop. They do not rest. They simply follow, patient and steady, until their prey collapses from exhaustion, and then they kill. Had never forgotten those words. Persistence predators, creatures that did not know how to quit. Now those creatures were coming. Sir, said, pulling from his memories, what should we do? It was a good question. The Concordants had laws about the quarantine. Any ship that crossed the line was supposed to be destroyed. Any contact with humans was forbidden. The rules were clear, written in the blood of those who had first encountered humanity. But those 3 human ships were heading toward survivors. They were responding to a distress call. They were trying to save lives. Calculate their arrival time, ordered. Worked at her console. At their current speed, 2 cycles, they will reach the Harmony's grace in 2 cycles. 2 cycles. The swarm would arrive in 6. The Concordance fleet would arrive in 18. If the humans did not act, everyone on that ship would die. Their speed is impossible, another officer spoke up. A scientist named, responsible for analyzing enemy capabilities. They are accelerating at rates that would kill any crew. The G-forces alone should turn them into paste. Humans can survive higher G-forces than any other known species, said quietly. Their bodies are dense. Their muscles are strong. They have a skeleton that can withstand impacts that would shatter our bones. Stared at him. How do you know this? I have read the classified files, said. Every admiral is required to read them, so that we understand what we are dealing with, so that we understand why the quarantine exists. He walked closer to the main screen, watching those 3 small shapes, so tiny compared to the vastness of space, so insignificant compared to the mighty Concordance fleet, and yet every officer in the room was terrified of them. The humans bond, continued, almost to himself. That is their greatest danger. They form emotional connections with anything. Other humans, other species, even animals and machines. They become attached. They start to care. That sounds harmless, said carefully. Shook his head. It is the opposite of harmless. When a human bonds with something, they become irrational. They will fight impossible odds. They will sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They will cross the galaxy to protect something they love. He turned to face his officers. The Concordance has protocols for dealing with threats. We calculate acceptable losses. We retreat when the odds are against us. We preserve our forces for battles we can win. Humans do not think this way. They do not accept losses. They do not retreat. They fight until they win or until they are dead. But surely they can be defeated, said. They are just one species. They are confined to a small sector. Their technology cannot be superior to ours. Their technology is not superior, agreed. It is different. Where we build elegant weapons, they build brutal ones. Where we seek precision, they seek destruction. Their ships are ugly, crude, covered in weapons that seem almost excessive. But every weapon works. Every system has a backup. Every backup has a backup. Because humans plan for the worst. The main screen updated. The 3 human ships had increased their speed again. They were pushing their engines beyond any safe limit, burning toward the Harmony's grace with single-minded determination. They heard a distress call, said. Strangers from species that locked them away for 300 years, and they are coming anyway. They are coming because someone needs help. He thought about what that meant. The Concordance had treated humanity with fear and suspicion. They had built walls and warnings. They had told the galaxy that humans were monsters. And now, when the Concordance could not protect its own people, the humans were responding. Not with anger or demands. Not with conditions or negotiations. Just 3 ships racing through space, ready to fight and die for strangers. Sir spoke again. Should we try to stop them? Watched the screen for a long moment. The swarm was moving closer to the Harmony's grace. Thousands of creatures, hungry and patient, waiting to feed. Against them, 3 small human ships. No, said finally. We will watch, we will document, and we will pray to whatever gods we believe in that the humans are everything the old stories say they are. Because if the stories were true, then the Eth swarm was about to learn a lesson that the Concordance had learned 300 years ago. There were worse things in the universe than ancient horrors. There were humans. And the humans were awake. The waiting was the worst part. Ambassador and sat in the emergency compartment, surrounded by 46 other survivors, and counted the hours. Outside the hull, the swarm circled like sharks around bleeding prey. They could hear them sometimes. The scraping of claws against metal, the clicking of hungry mouths, the patient sounds of predators who knew their meal was trapped. Some of the survivors had given up hope. They sat in corners, staring at nothing, waiting for the end. Others prayed to their gods, whispering ancient words in languages and did not understand. A few tried to plan escapes, but there was nowhere to go. The ship was broken. The engines were dead. They were alone in the void, and death was circling. And kept her eyes on the sensor screen. It was damaged, but it still worked. She watched for the human ships, though part of her wondered if they were even real. Perhaps the message had been a dream. Perhaps her mind had cracked under the pressure of waiting to die. Then the screen flickered, and 3 new shapes appeared. They were small compared to Concordance vessels. Compact and angular with sharp edges and no curves. Every surface was covered with weapons. Cannons, missile tubes, and strange devices that the computer could not identify. The ships looked angry and thought. They looked like they had been built by creatures who expected to fight. The names appeared on her screen: Defiance, Relentless, Fury. The communication panel crackled to life. Vessel Harmony's Grace, this is Captain Sarah of the Terran Response Fleet. We are approaching your position. Please respond. Anne's hearts began to race. Her hands trembled as she activated the communication system. "This is Ambassador Anne. We read you, Captain, we are." She paused, trying to find the right words. "We are grateful you have come." "Copy that, Ambassador. We have the swarm on our sensors, approximately 6,000 hostile units. Is that accurate?" 6,000. The number hit Anne like a physical blow. She had known the swarm was large, but hearing the exact count made it real. 6,000 creatures, each one capable of tearing through metal. Against them, 3 small ships with crews that probably numbered less than 100. "Captain," she said carefully, "I must warn you. The swarm is extremely dangerous. They have destroyed civilizations. Perhaps you should wait for the Concordance fleet. Perhaps." "Ambassador," the human's voice was calm, almost gentle. "We did not come this far to wait. We came to help. Now please tell your people to move away from the outer hull. Things are about to get loud." Before Anne could respond, the main screen activated. A face appeared, and for a moment Anne forgot how to breathe. She had studied images of humans in the classified files, but images could not capture the reality of seeing one. Captain Sarah was terrifying in a way that was hard to describe. She had 2 eyes, both facing forward, marking her as a predator. Her mouth contained rows of teeth designed for tearing and grinding. Her skin was a strange brown color, stretched over muscles that seemed too dense for her frame. But it was her expression that frightened Anne the most. The human was smiling. Her lips were pulled back, showing those terrible teeth, and her eyes were bright with something that looked almost like excitement, as if she was looking forward to the coming battle. "Ambassador," Captain said, "I am going to ask you to trust us. I know that is difficult. I know what the Concordance thinks of humanity, but right now you have 47 lives on that ship, and we are the only ones who can save them." The other survivors had gathered around the screen. They stared at the human with wide eyes. Some were trembling. Others could not look away. The young who had asked about the fleet earlier was crying silently, tears running down his scaled face. "What are you going to do?" Anne asked. Captain's smile widened. "Our job." The screen split, showing multiple views, and could see the 3 human ships spreading out, taking positions around the damaged Harmony's Grace. She could see the swarm, that massive cloud of black shapes, beginning to react to the new arrivals. "All hands," Captain's voice came through the speakers. She was no longer talking to Anne. She was talking to her crew, and there was iron in her words. "This is the Captain. For 300 years the galaxy has kept us locked away. They called us monsters. They said we were too dangerous to be free." And watched as the human ships powered up their weapons. Energy signatures spiked on her sensors. The crude, brutal machines were coming to life. "Today we show them what kind of monsters we really are." Captain paused. "Weapons free, let's go hunting." The universe exploded. And had seen space battles before. Elegant exchanges of energy weapons, careful maneuvers and calculated strikes. This was nothing like that. This was violence on a scale she had never imagined. The human ships charged directly into the swarm. They did not wait for the enemy to come to them. They did not take defensive positions. They attacked, aggressive and fast, firing everything they had. Nuclear missiles streaked through space, detonating among the swarm creatures. Fired metal projectiles at speeds that should have been impossible. Lasers cut through the darkness, slicing through alien flesh. And through it all, the human ships kept moving, kept firing, kept killing. The swarm reacted with fury. They swarmed toward the human vessels, thousands of creatures converging on these small attackers. They had never met prey that fought back this way. They had never encountered anything so aggressive. The ship called Fury took the first hit. A swarm creature crashed into its hull, tearing at the metal with razor claws, and watched in horror, expecting to see the ship disabled. Instead, she saw something impossible. Panels on the hull opened and human figures emerged. They were wearing armored suits, carrying weapons that looked too large for their bodies, and they were fighting, hand to hand, against creatures 5 times their size. One human was grabbed by a swarm creature. Its claws closed around the small figure, crushing the armor, drawing blood that floated in the vacuum. The human should have died. Any other species would have died. But the human raised a weapon and fired directly into the creature's mouth. The monster exploded. The human, wounded and bleeding, grabbed onto the hull and continued fighting. "They do not stop," the old whispered beside him. His voice was filled with awe. "Look at them, they do not stop." It was true. The humans fought with a desperation and fury that logic. They took wounds that would kill any other species and kept fighting. They lost friends and comrades and did not pause to grieve. They faced impossible odds and did not retreat. Captain's voice came through the communication panel, calm despite the chaos. "Ambassador, we are creating an opening. When I give the signal, reroute all power to your emergency thrusters. Head for the following coordinates. We will cover your escape." "But Captain," and said, "if we leave, you will be surrounded. You will be outnumbered even more." There was a pause, when Captain spoke again and could hear the smile in her voice. "That is the idea, Ambassador. The swarm will not follow you. They will be too busy with us." "You will die." "Maybe," Captain agreed, "but you will live, and that is what matters." And looked at the other survivors. 46 lives, 12 species, strangers to the humans, enemies even by the Concordance's standards. And the humans were willing to die for them. Captain and said softly, Why are you doing this? We locked you away. We called you monsters. Why would you sacrifice yourselves for us?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because you needed help, and we were close enough to hear." It was so simple, so pure, so utterly human. And began to cry. The battle lasted 47 hours. High Admiral watched from the Concordance Command Center, unable to look away. His officers stood frozen at their stations. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply watched as 3 small ships fought against thousands of monsters. The Harmony's Grace had escaped in the first hour. Ambassador and had followed Captain's instructions perfectly. The damaged ship had limped away from the battle, heading toward Concordant space at maximum speed. The swarm had tried to follow, but the human vessels had placed themselves in the way. They had blocked every path. They had killed everything that tried to pursue. And then they had kept fighting. 47 hours, his tactical officer whispered. Her voice was hoarse from disbelief. "How is that possible?" Did not answer. He was watching the ship called Relentless. Its main engines had been destroyed 12 hours ago. A swarm creature had torn through the engineering section, killing 6 crew members and ripping out the power core. Any normal ship would have been helpless. Any normal crew would have surrendered or died. The humans had not surrendered. They had not died. Instead, they had put on their armored suits, gone outside the ship and started making repairs. While the battle raged around them, while the swarm attacked from every direction, while their friends died and their ship burned. Had watched a human engineer work for 3 hours straight on a destroyed engine component. The engineer had been wounded. His suit was damaged. Blood was leaking from a tear in the armor. But he did not stop. He did not rest. He simply kept working, his hands steady even as his body weakened. When the repairs were complete, the Relentless had powered up again and rejoined the battle. "They rotate," the scientist said. He had been analyzing the human tactics for hours, trying to understand how they functioned. "They have shifts. Some fight while others rest. They sleep in 4-hour cycles. They eat at their stations. They never stop completely." "How can they maintain that pace?" asked. "Evolution," said quietly. "On their death world, the creatures that could not keep moving became prey. Only those who could push through exhaustion survived to reproduce. The humans are the descendants of beings who learned to ignore their own limits." On the screen, the ship called Fury was surrounded. At least 100 swarm creatures had converged on it, tearing at the hull from every angle. The ship was damaged beyond belief. Half its weapons were destroyed. Its shields had failed hours ago. Fire was visible through the breaches in the hull. Captain commanded the Fury. He was younger than Captain, with pale skin and red hair that stood out even on the grainy video feed. Had watched him fight for 2 days straight. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had simply stood on his bridge, giving orders, watching his crew die around him. Now his ship was dying too. "All hands," his voice came through the intercepted communications. "Prepare to repel boarders. They are coming through." The swarm creatures broke through the hull. Watched them pour into the ship, hundreds of claws and teeth and hunger. He expected to see the crew flee. He expected to see panic and surrender. Instead, he saw humans. They met the swarm in the corridors. They fought with guns and knives and bare hands. When they ran out of ammunition, they used tools. When the tools broke, they used their fists. They died by the dozens, but they did not stop fighting. One human woman grabbed a swarm creature by its throat. The monster was 3 times her size. It should have killed her instantly. But she held on, her muscles straining, her teeth bared in fury. She lifted the creature off the ground and threw it into its companions. Then she picked up a metal pipe and continued fighting. "They are insane," breathed. "No," said, "they are human." The Defiance moved to help. Captain's ship had been the least damaged of the 3. It had better shields, better weapons, and a crew that seemed to have no fear. Had spent the past 2 days hunting the swarm with cold precision. She did not fight like the others. She did not rage or scream. She simply killed, one target after another, with the calm patience of a predator who knew her prey could not escape. Now she brought her ship alongside the Fury. The 2 vessels locked together, and human soldiers poured through the connection. Fresh troops, armed and angry, joining their brothers and sisters in the fight. The tide began to turn. Watched as the humans pushed the swarm back. They cleared the corridors one by one. They sealed the breaches. They saved the wounded and counted the dead. And through it all, they kept fighting. "Sir," said suddenly, "the swarm is retreating." Looked at the tactical display. It was true. The remaining swarm creatures were pulling back. They had never done this before. In all of recorded history, the ETH swarm had never retreated. They attacked until they won or until they were destroyed. They did not know fear. But now they were running. "How many did we lose?" asked. Checked his calculations. The swarm started with approximately 6,000 units. Current count is, he paused, rechecking, approximately 900. The humans have destroyed more than 5,000 swarm creatures. "And the human losses?" "Unknown, sir, but I estimate at least half their crews are dead or wounded." Half the humans had lost half their people, and they were still fighting. On the screen, Captain's face appeared. She was speaking to Captain, whose ship was now barely functional. Blood stained her uniform. A fresh wound ran across her forehead, but her eyes were bright and her voice was steady. "Can you move?" "We can limp," replied, "barely you." "We are still in the fight," paused, looking at something off screen. "They are running, the swarm is running." "So what do we do?" Smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted wounded prey. "We chase them." Felt his blood run cold. The swarm was running. The battle was over. Any other species would declare victory and begin repairs. Any other species would tend to their wounded and mourn their dead. The humans wanted to hunt. "All ships," his voice rang out. "The swarm thinks they can escape. They think if they run far enough, fast enough, they will survive. They are wrong. We are going to follow them. We are going to hunt them down. And we are going to make sure that nothing is left." "Captain," a voice responded. It sounded exhausted. "We have wounded. We need rest." "Rest later," said. "Hunt now. That is who we are. That is what we do." The 3 human ships, battered and broken, turned toward the retreating swarm. Their engines fired, pushing them forward despite the damage. Their weapons charged, ready for more killing. And they followed. The swarm fled through space, trying desperately to escape. Behind them came the humans, not fast, not flashy, just steady, constant, relentless. Remembered his grandfather's words: persistence predators, creatures that follow their prey until it collapses from exhaustion. He had never truly understood what that meant until now. The hunt lasted for 30 more days. The humans tracked the swarm across 3 sectors. They fought dozens of smaller battles. They took more wounds and lost more people. But they did not stop. They did not rest. They simply followed, patient and steady, until there was nothing left to chase. When it was over, the Eth swarm was extinct. And the galaxy finally understood what humanity really was. Ambassador and stood before the High Council of the Galactic Concordance. The chamber was the largest in known space. 12 species sat in their designated sections, each representing billions of lives. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. 3 months had passed since the battle in the nebula. 3 months since 3 human ships had crossed the quarantine line. 3 months since the Eth swarm had been hunted to extinction by creatures the galaxy had tried to forget. Now the galaxy could no longer pretend the humans did not exist. Ambassador N, the council speaker, said. He was an ancient, his scales gray with age. You were there. You witnessed the humans firsthand. Tell us what you saw. And took a deep breath. She had prepared this speech 100 times. She had practiced the words until they felt natural on her tongue. But now, standing before the council, she found that her prepared words were not enough. I saw monsters, she said softly. That is what I expected to see. The stories told us that humans were violent, unpredictable, dangerous, and those stories were not wrong. The council members shifted in their seats. Several made sounds of concern. The representative leaned forward, his eyes narrow. So you confirm that the quarantine should remain in place? No, N's voice grew stronger. I saw monsters, but not the kind of monsters we feared. I saw creatures who crossed an ocean of stars to help strangers. I saw beings who fought impossible odds without hesitation. I saw people who were willing to die so that others could live. She paused, letting her words sink in. The humans did not ask for anything in return. They did not demand payment or favors. When I asked Captain why she was risking her life for us, she said something I will never forget. She said, because you needed help and we were close enough to hear. The chamber was silent and continued. We locked them away for 300 years. We told the galaxy they were too dangerous to be trusted. And when we were dying, when the swarm was about to devour us, the humans came anyway. They came because that is who they are. A counselor raised a claw. Ambassador, with respect, we cannot ignore the violence we witnessed. The humans hunted the swarm to extinction. They did not stop when the battle was won. They pursued their enemies across 3 sectors. Is this not the behavior of monsters? And nodded slowly. I asked Captain about that as well. After the battle, after her ships were finally safe, I asked why she had continued the hunt, why she had not let the swarm escape. Do you know what she told me? The council waited. She said the swarm would have returned. In 10 years or 50 or 100, they would have rebuilt their numbers and attacked again. More ships would have sent distress signals. More innocent beings would have died. So we made sure that could never happen. We finished the job. And spread her arms wide, addressing the entire chamber. The humans are not mindless killers. They are protectors. They form bonds with anyone they meet. They care about creatures they have never seen. And when something threatens the beings they care about, they respond with absolute determination. They do not stop. They do not quit. They do not accept defeat. She lowered her arms. The question is not whether the humans are dangerous. Of course they are dangerous. The question is whether we want that danger pointed at us or standing beside us. The council speaker tapped his claw on the podium. What are you suggesting, Ambassador? I am suggesting we end the quarantine, and said. I am suggesting we invite the humans to join the Concordance, not as prisoners or threats but as allies, as friends. The chamber erupted in noise. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. Some counselors were furious. Others were frightened. A few were nodding thoughtfully. The speaker raised his hands for silence. It took several minutes before the chamber calmed. We have received a message from the human government, the speaker announced. They have asked to address the council directly. Given the circumstances, I believe we should hear what they have to say. The main screen activated. Captain Sarah appeared, looking tired but strong. The wounds from the battle had healed, but Anne could see new scars on her face. She wore a formal uniform now, decorated with symbols that meant nothing to the Concordance but clearly represented great honor among her people. Honorable Council, said. Her voice was calm and respectful. I will not take much of your time. I know you have difficult decisions to make. She paused, choosing her words carefully. 300 years ago, your people met mine. We extended our hands in friendship. You responded with fear. You built walls around us and told the galaxy we were monsters. Several counselors looked uncomfortable, continued. We understood. We know what we are. We know that our history is written in blood. We know that we come from a world that taught us to fight and kill and survive. We know that we are frightening. Her expression softened. But we also know something else. We know that the universe is dangerous. We know that there are threats out there that do not care about diplomacy or peace. The swarm was one such threat. There will be others. Leaned forward, her eyes intense. When those threats come, you will need allies who are not afraid to fight. You will need friends who will stand beside you even when the odds are impossible. You will need people who do not know how to give up. She smiled, and for the first time, and saw warmth in that smile. We never wanted to be feared. We wanted to be trusted. We wanted to help. For 300 years, we have waited for the chance to show you who we really are. Now you have seen us. You have seen what we do to things that threaten innocent lives. Her smile widened. Imagine what we would do for actual friends. The screen went dark. The council sat in stunned silence. The vote was held 3 days later. It was not unanimous. Some species could not overcome their fear. Some remembered the old stories and could not see past them. But the majority voted to end the quarantine. The majority voted to invite humanity into the Concordance. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had never met a human began to prepare for contact. Some were excited. Some were nervous. All of them understood that the universe had changed. On her repaired ship, Ambassador Anne received word of the Council's decision. She was traveling back to, finally going home after months of chaos and wonder. A message from Captain was waiting for her. Ambassador, I heard about the vote. Thank you for speaking on our behalf. And recorded her response. Captain, I only told them the truth. You saved my life. You saved all of us. How could I do anything less? His reply came quickly. We would have done it anyway, even if you had kept the quarantine, even if you had continued to call us monsters. We heard a distress signal and we responded. That is what we do. And smiled at the screen. Then I am glad we finally understand that. Across the galaxy, the first human ambassadors were preparing to meet their new allies. Trade agreements were being drafted. Military partnerships were being discussed. A new era was beginning, one where humanity walked among the stars as equals, not prisoners. And in the quiet corners of space, creatures that had once thought themselves the apex predators began to learn fear. They had heard the stories now. They had seen the recordings of the battle. They knew what had happened to the Eth swarm. They knew what happened when you threatened something a human cared about. The monsters were watching, and for the first time in their ancient lives, the monsters were afraid. Because now the humans were free, and the humans had friends. And the humans never, ever forgot.